Y'all know what it is.
So I was wondering if we could maybe jump back into the early years of the X-Men and talk about going into the studio as a crew and producing an album. I've worked with a few bands that have gone through the recording process, and usually it's a win-win-win, the whole thing. You come out with a finished product. Everyone in the group usually kind of comes together and they perfect their set during the recording process. Can you actually go through that? Your maybe the first time through, and then the second time when you actually had a budget, how that made a difference.
Yeah, well, we signed an independent deal in 1997 with a label called Asphodel Records. And for me, the beauty of that time period as recording artists, not kids that were entering sanctioned battles like the DMC and the New Music Seminar, was now we were in a recording studio and being given the opportunity to express ourselves through a different medium. There's just so much you can accomplish as a battle DJ. You could win a battle, make a name for yourself, and then you take that step and move forward into your career. And that's what we did when we signed our record contract with Asphodel Records. We wanted to, again, elevate ourselves, maximize our potential. And it was a great experience because it was our first album and the label gave us freedom to do whatever we wanted.
That's awesome.
It is super critical. And you know, another thing that's interesting about that experience was it's not like we were necessarily groomed or experienced recording artists. Also, when you couple the idea that Asphodel Records wasn't a hip hop label, they were more of an experimental label. So you had a label that was putting out avant-garde experimental music that knew nothing about turntablism, but was aware and hip to who the X-Men were. And then you had the X-Men who were inexperienced in the studio, but masters at putting together a battle routine. So it's like, no one really knew what was going to come of the first album, but that freedom was so genuine that we were just having fun. And that fun got us to complete an album that went on to be critically acclaimed and landed us a potential record deal with Rick Rubin. First, before we signed with Loud Records, Rick Rubin, who, I mean, I don't have to explain who he is. That said, I mean, he founded LL Cool J, produced songs like Peter Piper and Walk This Way for Run DMC, worked with artists like Jay-Z, Black Crowes, Red Hot Chili Peppers. This guy is like the Quincy Jones of producers. And he came to see us perform at a club in LA and was just moved and met us backstage and was like, I want to sign you guys to my label. Took us out to breakfast the next day. We told him we were going to sign the record contract. And then one of the original X-Men members, Sean C., who by now was an A&R at Loud Records, found out that Rick Rubin wanted to sign the group and intercepted the deal and got us to sign with Loud. So the album Expressions, our freshman work, just made so much noise that now major labels wanted to fuck with us. And I think the difference, to answer your question, between the first independent album by the X-Ecutioners, Expressions, and the major label album, the sophomore piece of work built from scratch, was we had a bigger budget and higher expectations. So when we put together Expressions, there were no expectations. We were just taking
do
it
you
one
think
step
that
at a
was
time.
liberating? Do you think that actually helped the process by not having the expectations? Because when you go in the second time and have, you know, big dollars and people looking over, watching over your shoulders, it almost kind of hamstrings you, I think.
Definitely. I think that it was like we were putting together battle routines when we were recording Expressions. We were just taking it one scratch at a time, one idea at a time. And we weren't concerned with selling records. We just wanted to make music with our friends. And if you listen to Expressions, there are no big time features on the project. It's us and our buddies from around the way who could rap, who we wanted to give a chance and a platform for their voice to be heard. That's Expressions in a nutshell. When we got to Loud, now we had expectations. We had this critically acclaimed freshman album, and we needed to top it. And we were given a huge budget, and we wanted to make that budget back for the label. And so that pressure definitely created more tension, to be honest with you, amongst the members of the group, because we didn't have that freedom and there wasn't those expectations. And it's like taking a test, man. Like, you could want to get a good grade, but just wanting to get a good grade is making you stressed out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And with regards to putting together Built from Scratch, it was more of a, fuck, man, like, this is Loud Records and Wu-Tang is on here and Big Pun and Mobb Deep, and we're DJs. And, you know, already at that time in music industry, although DJs are celebrated now today, at that time, we were still fighting for love and respect from the record industry, because when you saw a DJ and a rapper on stage or in a music video, the rapper was in the forefront. The DJ was just in the background, like, not really a part of the art as much as it was in the early stages of this art form growing what it is to be. Once hip hop became mainstream, the rapper got all of the attention and the DJ fell by the wayside. So we were like, man, we're DJs on this label with all these amazing rappers. We need to put together a project that's gonna show them that DJs are just as important to the music industry as the rappers are. And we successfully did that. But again, when you're working on music and you're putting those expectations on yourself, it's a little more stressful, you know? But that said, we had a lot of guidance. Our A&R was an original member of the X-Men. Big ups to Sean C. And he guided us through the whole experience. And we put together Built from Scratch. And then that was another critically acclaimed album. I think label-wise, things started to fall apart when we went to record the third album. By then, Loud Records didn't exist. And Sony Records, which was the big brother label to Loud, took the X-Ecutioners and gave us a 1-album deal. And it was basically, let's see what you do with this album. And the difference with the third album, Revolutions, was the guidance wasn't there in the same way from the label that it was when we were on Loud. And as a result, we put together, at least we made our best efforts to put together a third banging album, but it just wasn't as powerful as the first 2 albums. You know what I mean? So I think the moral of the story there is being on a major record label isn't necessarily a good thing. Sometimes you could be on a label and the people, the staff, don't even care about you as an artist, you know? So I'm thankful for labels like Fat Beats, whom I've been putting out music with in the last couple of years, their existence all these years. I mean, they've had so much longevity as a record label in hip hop, and they still give back to the artists that they came up with. And I put my music out through them now. So I'm still here working on music, and I'm happy, but also appreciative of the experiences that I had with Sony, with Loud Records, obviously with Asphodel Records, because it helped me understand the music industry in a way that battling didn't.
Yeah, no, I think the one thing that's interesting, and I just kind of wanted to comment on it as you're going through here, during that built from scratch era, which was when I, personally was most, in love with the X-Ecutioners, or most familiar through sort of my connection with Linkin Park and those guys. I think one thing that happened in that period is we were talking earlier about sort of this accumulation of things that make up what is hip hop. I think that was sort of maybe a new sort of, a precipice of a collaboration between sort of rock and hip hop and all that becoming one thing. I had seen you guys on one tour, with Linkin Park, Apex Theory, Head PE, some of these other guys. And, so I saw you both in that rap or rock environment. And then I also saw you guys on Anger Management tour with Eminem, Ludacris, and I was working with a band called Bionic Jive at the time. And, and so on both of those tours, I mean, dramatically different, right? We've got hip hop in the hip hop world, but then we also have hip hop in this rock world. And I think Linkin Park was one of these bands, and obviously there'd been others, like the Limp Bizkits of the world and stuff that had a lot of hip hop influence. But I think that Linkin Park was so big and took it to this other level where all of a sudden hip hop and, rock music and all this stuff, it just kind of became its own new thing. This was the evolution of hip hop. So I think that album, in particular, not to say that any one of them were any more impactful or influential than another, but I think that, that one hit America in a different way where all of a sudden, or maybe the world in a different way, where all of a sudden it really melded those two art forms. And so I think that album, maybe I'm not sure if it gets the due that it deserves, but I think it was really an impactful moment in music.
Are you talking about Hybrid Theory, the Linkin Park album, or Built from Scratch?
No, built from scratch. It's going down with Shinoda and Han.
It's going down, for sure. Man.
That song, they had already been, obviously Linkin Park had already been using a lot of hip hop in their stuff. I mean, Mike Shinoda is an MC, and Han was a great DJ, and so, but that I think sort of, I guess maybe legitimized them, right? So Linkin Park had their own thing, but like bringing them into something that was so, I guess, pure hip hop, right? This thing that was born in New York and had sort of grown up, and now here they are working together and collaborating like this, and it led to other amazing things too. I think it sort of influenced things like the Collision Course stuff and everything else. So I think that album was maybe more impactful than just the sound that you guys put down. I think that what it did for sort of the genre in general is maybe even bigger.
I agree 1000%. You used the word legitimize, and I feel like Built from Scratch legitimized DJing for the world.
Yeah.
And I say this without fear of error. If it wasn't for what the X-Ecutioners, Roc Raida, rest in peace, so do Eclipse, Mista Sinista, myself, Rob Swift, did with regards to putting together an album like Built from Scratch that featured artists, yes, like Linkin Park and Biz Markie and Everlast and MOP. We did it on our terms. And each song on that album was created and recorded through the lens of a DJ, not a rapper. And I think that's the beauty of Built from Scratch. The typical hip hop song, especially today, is composed through the lens of the rapper. So the rapper picks the producer. Nowadays, you're lucky to even hear scratches on the majority of hip hop songs that we hear on YouTube. But Built from Scratch was composed through the lens of DJs. So the DJ decided who was going to rap on the song, who was going to produce these songs, how we were going to market the album, how we were going to create the aesthetic of the album, the cover art. That was through the lens of a DJ, like it was back in the day with Kool Herc and Bambaataa and Grandmaster Flash. So I really feel, I am confident that Built From Scratch planted the seed for everything that is happening in the DJ community right now. And I don't say that in a boastful way. I say that in all honesty, in a genuine way, because a lot of people don't realize that by 1994, 95, and I'm talking about authentic hip hop, not rap or commercial hip hop or the bullshit that, you know, we associate commercialism with, right? I don't want to necessarily diss anyone specifically. But by 1995, I would say 15%, possibly less, of the music that was out featured scratches. A lot of the music by then, it was a rapper with someone singing in the hook and the beat. And you were lucky to hear scratches. Obviously, you still had Pete Rock putting out music, Premier, and those guys have stayed true to every element of this culture to this day. But a lot of people were going from being these dope DJs to now they're just producing and they're not even owning turntables. You know what I mean? You go to their home studios and you see a SB1200 and a mixer and no turntable. We, the X-Ecutioners, the X-Men, put DJing on our shoulders and not only continued in the battle scene, whether it was judging battles or still competing against other crews like the Invisible Scratch Pickles, peace to those guys. We were like, yo, man, we want the music industry to respect this more than they have. You know, DJing was marginalized from the moment Sugar Hill Gang released Rapper's Delight. You know what I mean? DJing was marginalized and it became about the rapper. Built From Scratch, I feel, was our statement to that mentality that DJing wasn't necessarily as important to the packaging of an album as rapping was. That was a refute of that mentality. And because of that, you have now DJing, this billion-dollar industry, and you have companies designing mixers and DJ apps for people to DJ easier. And I am confident when I say, if it wasn't for Built From Scratch and what that album did, especially Linkin Park helping us with It's Going Down, I don't know if DJing would look the way it does now. And I'm not saying that we're the only dudes that helped this art form evolve to what it is now, but I am saying we did it on the grandest scale. You know, no other DJ crews were putting out major label albums.